So Mark, you're an enterprise architect. Tell me about the kinds of projects you get involved in.
Well, as a consulting architect, I typically would deal with multiple clients, so I'm not embedded within a single organization. And that gives you a lot of scope to experience different organizations, different sectors, and a lot of exposure to the way different businesses do things, and they are different every time.
Okay.
Typically within an engagement, it would mean setting up the enterprise architecture function within that organization. So we would engage with the executive management of the business to understand what the business strategies are, and also do an environmental analysis to understand what external trends are influencing that business. So it might be a good example like the current financial crisis or credit crunch would be one of those events which causes organizations to have to change the way they do things, and we need to be able to build architectures that are flexible and responsible to those kinds of events. So it's very important that we start at the top and work our way down.
So you start off by understanding the strategic context that the organization works in.
Absolutely.
What do you do next?
As well as the sector that it works in. Next, we distill. If we're fortunate enough, the organization will have a strategic plan, and we'll be able to take that and the key themes within that strategic plan and use those as input into our work. If they don't have that, then we have to really sit with the executive team and figure out what it is, because an organization always has a strategy, it just might not be written down. So either you have one or you need to extract one. The next thing that you do from that is we take the key business drivers. What are the main events that the organization is busy with in order to progress it forward? So these would be themes around, and we call them themes, and they would be things like an initiative to decentralize their services out into a branch network, as a good example. Okay, and we distill those and gather a handful of maybe 10, and with those we'd start working on what the information requirements. When I talk about information, it's data and associated things, so it's structured and unstructured data, all of the documents, all of the structured data that would be things which are contained in databases, and information and knowledge within people's heads and business processes. So we look at those requirements and we use those to start building out the architecture. We then look at three areas: the business architecture we generally start with first, and the information architecture. And those give you the foundational elements to start doing the technical architecture. And the technical architecture is from the ground up, so the plumbing and the bits of tin that it all runs on, and then the applications and the associated bundling of all of those things on top.
So that comes last, then, the technical architecture?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If our goal is to try and align that to what the business requires, we don't start with it, we end with that, and then we end up with something which actually fits what the business requires. And we build a portfolio, so it's kind of like an investment manager. You build a portfolio of technology assets and then you value them, but not the way the technology values them, the way the business values them. And from that we can start mapping out how you manage, your strategic investments. Do you invest more money into this component? Do you just maintain it, or do you start to retire it? And in a nutshell, that's what enterprise architecture is. The function itself also needs to have processes and governance. So that means rules. So we need to set the rules, and we need to put the processes in place that the rules can be obeyed. And we use those to catch new work and to evaluate it against the architecture once it's done, to make sure it stays aligned.
And what's the most challenging thing for you about what you do?
Politics. People, on the business side, because you're asking business executives about their strategic plans, sometimes they're not comfortable to talk about them, and oftentimes they view enterprise architecture as being a technology thing, and they don't really understand why technologists would want to really understand the business strategy. But they also ask you to align your technology to the business strategy. So it's about coaching the business executives through the process about getting an aligned architecture and why it's important that they divulge their strategy and maybe assist with them in shaping it. And then on the technology side, we have a lot of religious technology wars. You have people married to certain things, and you may have things which have gone very wrong and people don't want them to be found out, but architecture delves into all of these things, so it can be quite painful for a lot of people. And dealing with the fallout from that and the way that people react to these various things and orchestrating things so that people start working together, that is the single biggest challenge.